worked with them for a year. We had a contract for them, and we were trained. That was 18 medical centers. Our last one was in New York City. But interestingly, we developed a program on the spot to meet the needs of the caregivers that were in front of us. A week later, we almost got taken apart by the VA because we didn't follow their guidelines. Fortunately, I was speaking at a conference, was it in Orlando? And I have a lot of friends in the CIA and FBI and all that, in the military. And I'm holding this letter, and one of them was a psychologist, and she says, you know, you're emotionally hemorrhaging all over the place. I said, read this letter. They're going to take me apart. And they said, don't worry about it. We'll dictate the letter. We'll tell you just what to say, and they'll never bother you again. She took the dictation. They never bothered us again. So what I realized was we were also dealing with the stresses that these folks were under. And it wasn't just, we used to say, well, you're dealing with a lot of stress dealing with these people that are in such bad shape, and they go, oh no, our stress is dealing with the demands of the system on us, on top of everything else. And little did we know, a week later, we'd find out what they were really talking about, because we felt the stress of it too. But we took it on. And we found a way to work with these folks for a year to develop a protocol and a way of preventing burnout. There are a lot, when we talk about burnout is the last stage that people come to when they're helping in the helping professions. There's a lot of things that happen before burnout. We talk about stress. Well, there's normal stresses, that's not all bad. And then there's the stress that begins to take its toll on you. Then there's what they call compassion fatigue. Anybody in the helping professions, anybody who's in the ER knows what this is. If you're helping people, you get exhausted. You absorb the energy that you're helping. You're putting out 100% of yourself for people that are in real distress. And so what begins to happen is we begin to get, I want to call them yellow flags, not red flags yet, but your body begins to tell you something's not right. You're beginning to accumulate stress and distress, and it's piling up. What happens to really good caregivers that start with the best intentions, and we know many, they eventually start, when they're starting to get exhausted, start getting resentful. And our work isn't done in the best spirit anymore because they're exhausted and they don't even want to do it. If they reach the burnout point, they're done. They do not want to do it. They don't want to show up for work. They resent the work. They resent the people they're working with. They want out. But there's things that happen before that. Compassion fatigue is a good wake-up call. And one of the things we find is when people have compassion fatigue, that can be turned around before it reaches burnout. As long as people begin to, as caregivers, begin to realize what's beginning to happen to their bodies. And they have to be in a very good, you got to be in a good place emotionally, really, and to handle the kind of work we do. Because if you're not going to be able to be nourishing and nurturing to people that are in devastating situations. Working in the ER, who isn't coming through that's not devastated? In working with trauma the way I've worked, everybody's devastated. But what we're learning is, well, we want to give that. There's people here that are very motivated. And you've heard some really interesting stories today about what brought them to the helping professions. They want to give. They want to care. They're what they call empaths, people who are more sensitive. Whatever they've gone through that's brought them to it, they're almost like emotional sponges. But they're sensitive, they're intuitive, they're caring for others. It's a great ability. It's a real nice thing to be. There's a problem with it though. If you don't know how to take care of yourself, you're the first people to burn out because you're taking on, while you're helping others, you're actually absorbing the energy of folks that are very distressed and sick and frightened and traumatized. And after a while, we begin to accumulate. If we don't know how to deal with that and take care of it, it begins to pile on itself. So you may have started off in a good place, but then all of a sudden, you begin not to do so well. And you alluded to so many people in the crisis work, particularly ER work, turn to drugs and alcohol. It's really common. That doesn't solve anything. In fact, it makes it a lot worse, but yet it's so common. First responders are notorious, and look at the great work they do. And yet, look what, there's so many of them turn to alcohol and drugs. So we're looking at that and we're saying, okay, we got to find a way to wake people up so they can begin to get a reading on themselves before they reach burnout. They started off good, they were empaths, they really were caring and motivated, and yet somehow along the line, they just became depleted and exhausted. And then their personal lives begin to suffer because their relationships begin to suffer. There's so many things that begin to happen. These are all warning signs to somebody to start paying attention, to get some help. We talk about emotional life being so important. Your emotional life is so important to have the quality of work you deliver. It's not just the medical and technical abilities, although they're important if you're in that profession. It's the spirit behind it. It's your emotional health. It's your own stability that really matters for you to deliver the goods over a long period of time. I've been doing this work, I'm going on 50 years. Most of the people I know have either died or fell away because the work was so intense. Hey, I'm 73 and I'm roaring. I got so much more to do. My staff is pretty motivated. We have a nonprofit for caregivers and veterans and their caregivers. And I can tell you that not only am I not burned out, my passion has grown. It's always been that way. But I know how to take care of myself too. And because of that, I can teach other people how to do it. So not only is it out of the books and out of the psychological theories anymore, it's out of my own personal experiences, and I've experienced of helping thousands of people get back on their feet that have been traumatized. A lot of them have been caregivers. So we're very dedicated. At this point, I'm dedicated to all caregivers. We even have changed our nonprofit, which used to be only for veterans and their caregivers, to all caregivers. Why? Because so many families are coming to us and they're dealing with sickness and dying and death. And they're burned out, they're exhausted, they're distressed, they're getting ill. 63% die before the people they're taking care of. That's pretty high percentage. So we're looking at that and they're asking for help. We've even gotten to the point now where we hire people, find people, help them. So we're also dealing with I call them semi-professional caregivers, but they're not family members, and we're training them on how not to burn out, because they also start with very good intentions, but they get exhausted too and used up. So we're actually developing programs to help them not to burn out, how to begin to take care of themselves. We call it self-care. A lot of folks, when you're working in caring professions, thinks that's being selfish, because the people we're dealing with are so much more distressed, so much sicker. And that's a warning sign for us. That means your boundaries are coming down and you're losing your grounding. Because if you don't take care of yourself and keep yourself, and this is an ongoing process, this isn't like one shot and that's it, once a year having somebody talk to you. There's a lot you have to do to take care of yourself. You're not going to make it. So we're finding that we've got to help folks learn to be resilient, to even improve and deepen their abilities to give and to care. And one of the things I've heard today that was I like a lot of things I've heard today, but one of the things I heard is we're not talking about an easy life. If you're going to be a caregiver, you're not talking about moving into the easy kind of living. You're talking about moving into the part of life that most people, especially here in the United States, don't want to even admit that that's a condition of life until it's on top of them. You're talking about living in it and working in it. Most people don't want to admit it until it's on top of them. So what we're finding is, and what we're doing with our radio show too, is letting people know, hey, this is a condition of life. You got to know that suffering and struggle are going to come on everybody, and so is dying and death. But the key is, does it have to destroy you? And the answer is no. Is there hope? And the answer is yes. Can we learn from it and grow and improve and become better as individuals? And the answer is absolutely. But there are things that you have to do to prevent yourself from getting to that other space, which is embittered, resentful. I've heard more people say to me, well, they're better off dead. And I've heard that a lot when they're caregivers and they've become resentful and bitter. Better off they die, they're just a pain in the butt, and I go, whoa, that's not good. but yet there are so many that do that. And they go, well, how about you? And I go, I don't feel that way at all. I'm just grateful for every little thing in my life. If anything, I've developed a sense of gratitude for the little things. Now, this is a guy who had to go to Tahiti every 3 months in Hawaii. Today, if I can just go to my horses for 2 hours, I'm grateful. Just to see my wife breathe in the morning and hold her hand and pray with her, I'm grateful. That she's alive makes me grateful. Now, I know her life isn't easy, but I also look at it and I go, it's the more important things that are coming into focus out of all of the suffering and struggle, mine, as well as so many people that we help. And it really has to do with appreciation for what we really do have. So out of this work, there's a strengthening that comes out of it and a resilience. There's a book out now by the Marstons called Transformative Resilience. And I heard First Lady talking, she was wonderful, I can't remember her name, Musetta? And Musetta was talking about her life. And I really liked it. And she was talking about what she went through. She went through a lot of struggle and suffering, but she also talked about something I love. She didn't run away. She faced what was in front of her. And instead of, even though her tendency probably would have been, let me out of here, this is a nightmare, she put it together in another way. She embraced the challenge. And instead of letting it destroy her, it began to change her life. It's called Transformative Resilience. We are a great proponent of it. The Marstons are. We talk about it a lot. I do want to say this, and I'm not perfect. I'm one of these tough guys, and I'll tell you my history in a minute. So when I do see people run away in the face of challenge, I'm not empathetic toward them. I look at them and go, what a wimp. Come on, this is what's going on here. Where are you going? These people need your help, and they need your caring. Well, we had a guest on the show as a psychologist and friend, and she has an empathy for the people that can't handle it and run away. And I listen carefully, and I'm like the main man on the show, and I was learning. Doesn't mean I learned a lot, but I learned a little more about having some empathy, because mine is like Musetta's. The challenges come, I will, whatever they are, I've been raised to embrace them, to engage with them. And every one of them has made me stronger and better and more resilient for the next challenges. If you work in the ER and ICU, you're not going anyplace. Everything that walks through that door is very serious stuff. And if you embrace it, you get better. You may get tired. Emotional exhaustion, everybody has. But you improve as a person. And all of a sudden, your values begin to fall into place about what truly matters in life. And you're looking at a man that today doesn't stand here as a psychologist and psychotherapist. He stands here as a human being. And I like that a lot better. And it's taken, as my mother said, it's taken you almost 50 years to get there, but it's good that you're there now. And you know what? She's right. And she's 93, and she's still got some wisdom in there. But I didn't even realize I lost my humanity until the depth of suffering. And I was very invested as a very successful psychotherapist for a long, long time. Today, we do lots of things at our institute, but I don't profess psychotherapy anymore. I look at a human being who's struggling, and if they're grieving or they have post-traumatic stress, I don't consider it a disorder. It's a part of life. Look what they've been through. No wonder they're feeling the way they do. We have the ways to help them through the effects of it, but I'll be darned if I'm going to label them as a disordered person. And that's what I used to do. So I'm learning so much through my own personal challenges to this day. And to tell you the truth, as difficult as my life is, I love it. I love my life. I love the people I'm surrounded with. I love my community. They love us. I love all of my staff. I have great staff. But we all work as a team, and it's wonderful. So let me just take it aside, since everybody told you about their backgrounds and how they got there. So it's interesting stuff. I didn't come out of a world of academia seeking PhDs. I come from the streets of Newark, New Jersey. I was in gangs. I went into the construction business after I was in the military, after the Vietnam era. And I had a tough life. No question about it. I was a tough guy, but I survived. But one of the things that happened was my father had a heart attack, and he had a big construction company. He was not a nice man. And I had to take over, and I was glad to do it. Little did I know that we were ready for a fight with organized mafia. And frankly, if you grew up in New Jersey, it's all around you. But it wasn't really part of my life until I took over my father's business. And I remember coming from, I'll just tell you how the parts of it, and I was coming home from New York City. And I was going into one of my father's projects, and I saw, they call them wise guys, and I saw 3 wise guys coming out of my father's office, and I'm going, we're in trouble. They're in trouble because my father was more violent than they were. And they came in and intimidated them, and they were going to take over their jobs. And I'm thinking, oh, really? Sure. And my father put a gun to their heads and threw them out of the office. And I'm going, oh, boy. 3 days later, they blew up our first building. And that went on for 3 years. In that period of time, I really thought I could handle it. I was a tough young guy. I'd just come out of the service. I was a fighter. And I took them on. And I took them on full force, toe to toe. I hated them. But what you find when you're in battle and in war, eventually you almost lose your conscience, and you develop your attitudes that are similar to your enemy. And I had that. After about 3 years, I came to a place in my own life of conscience, and I realized I was losing mine. And we saw people being killed around us and all kinds of things, but I didn't want us to be doing that, although I had people that would do it for me in a minute. But I was starting to go, maybe it's okay. Maybe I ought to let some of my guys go kill these people. I can't stand them. And I realized I was in trouble, real trouble. So I took a little break, not long because I was working all the time. But one of the things that was interesting was I wasn't a spiritual person at all, or a religious person. And it was almost like a voice came to me saying, I remember thinking to myself, now what am I going to do? How do I get out of this? This is the only world I know. And I could hear it was God, as far as I was concerned, telling me there's another life for you. This isn't for you. And I'm thinking, really? This is all I know. And 3 weeks later, this guy who was an accountant of mine, very nice man, and he said, we need to talk. And his name was Phil Genovese, very nice man. And he says, you need to come to the office. I said, I know, we've lost millions of dollars. They've got us. He says, no, I want to talk to you. So I went to his office, and I didn't talk like I talk now. And I remember sitting down, and I go, so what's the story? And he says, I've been watching you for 3 years. He says, do you know why you're still alive? I said, yeah, I'm a tough guy. He says, really? Grow up, kid. You're not alive because of that. You're alive because of me. And I go, who are you? You're my accountant. He says, no, my father's Vito Genovese, and he's the head of all the mafia. And that's why you're still alive. And he said, my father's died, and now all these families are coming after you because you took them all on. And he says, I can't protect you anymore. And I said, whoa, really? That sounds scary, a little bit. I wasn't that aware at that point, but I know it was scary. But he said to me, I've been watching you for 3 years. I said, you have? And he says, I watch how you take care of your people. He says, you're a very caring guy. I know you don't like people to know that because that's a vulnerability. He didn't say the word vulnerable. I didn't even know what that meant. He says, but I watch how you take care of people. You really care about their families. You care about their well-being. He says, you're a caring guy. This is not the world for you. And I go, really? He says, did you ever think about becoming a psychologist? And I looked at him and go, what is a psychologist? I don't even know how to spell it. What is that? And he told me, and he says, well, psychologists are people that help others, and they're professionals. And they go to school. And I said, I was thrown out of school. He says, you're young. Why don't you go start your life again and act your age and start and build a new life based on caring for other people? And I remember saying, I go, yeah, I have no more money. He says, I'm going to give you the money to get started again. And he says, I want you to leave New Jersey in the next 3 weeks. And I'm going to give you the money to go back to school. And I want you to go to school to learn to be a psychologist. Now, you have no clue about how far that was from the world I grew up in. But interestingly, I've been on that road of helping others and growing personally and professionally. It's 49 years. And I look back on that, I'm very grateful for that man. He was the first person that actually came alongside me and cared about me and turned me in the direction of caring and sensitivity and empathy and being a caregiver. He recognized me as an empath, and I was very grateful. But it's also taught me that here's the world I came from, and look at all the trauma I went through, and look at how it's turned out, and it continues to turn out. Through suffering, struggle, adversity, and pain, I've grown stronger, I've grown more capable, I've grown more purposeful, and I've actually stepped out of my professional role and silo and become more human, and it hasn't stopped. So to me, it's a very inspiring thing to hear stories. Oh, done? Okay. Hey, Norel says we're done, we're done. You can hear my New Jersey. All right, I get it. Or I could say I forget about it, don't worry about it. But anyway, I was really grateful. Norel's listened to some of our broadcasts, and she liked them. I guess that's why she invited us. But I'm glad to be here today, and any of you who are thinking about caregiving professions, don't worry about where you started. And I heard that tonight. Let it play out. Take a look at things. You don't have to be on target from day one of your academic career to be a good caregiver. In fact, the best caregivers I know don't start that way. They have something in their lives. They've taken care of others. They've lost people. They've done all of these things, and it began to change their life. Then they pursue the profession, just like I did. But if you're not on target yet, I wouldn't worry about it. I would keep an open mind and let things just kind of unfold. But if you're into that, I want to just emphasize one thing. Self-care for the rest of your life will be immensely important, or you won't make it, and you will burn out. And that's no fun. So I encourage all of you. I think we've had some really interesting speakers today, and very personal. So I hope that what I'm offering helps too, and I wish you all the best, to be honest with you. We need good people. So, Norel said this is it.